First up, thanks all for watching parts 1, 2 and 3 of my series of Access All Areas films with Channel 4 Racing, for the retweets and for your kind comments. Those earlier films are available on YouTube, Vimeo and of course at www.vgtips.co.uk. Thanks also, a big thank you secondly to the production team of Channel 4 Racing at IMG, to Carl Hicks, executive producer, and to Hannah Walker and everyone at Channel 4 for allowing me that exclusive access. My filming of A Week in the Life of Channel 4 Racing was shot between November the 28th and December the 4th, 2015. That's 4 weeks before Racing Post reporter Lee Mottershead broke the news that the powers that be in racing would not be renewing the contract with Channel 4. Instead, in the pursuit of the holy grail called viewing figures, Racing had decided to go down market and award ITV the contract to cover racing from 2017. So, when I filmed with the IMG team, they had no idea that their long-term dedication to covering a sport they feel so passionate about was about to be cast aside. I have my opinion on this broadcasting development and will voice it either on camera or in print before the year is out. But first, let me take you to Sandown Park. It's early December and I'm sitting in on a production meeting of Channel 4 Racing. I'm filming on set as the show went live in the afternoon, presented by Nick Luck. And I sit down for a conversation with Carl Hicks, executive producer. We talk viewing figures and the shows he's been most proud of since he's produced the output. But I began by asking him what his hopes, aims were 3 years earlier when IMG won the contract to produce Channel 4 Racing.
The best bit is when I went, they're not listening.
The sport is king, as I think we all believe about any sport that we cover as sports producers. But my sort of, if I had to have a sort of mission statement in that time, and I still stand by it, is that it was to make the sport of horse racing more appealing to sports fans. Now that's not some demographic group of 18 to 30s or men or women, but I know from background, and I've done Olympic Games and lots of big things, that there is there are all sort of marketing presentations talk about this bubble of 25-30 million people who actually like big sporting events. And what I wanted to know is why not as many of them were fans of horse racing. So it's to treat the sport as a sport, not just as a medium for gambling, although you mustn't underestimate the impact that has. What I thought we have to do, and I thought what we've tried to do, is give people a reason to watch other than just because they've had a bet. Now I will always counter that, or I will always qualify that by saying you must never forget your core betting audience, because they are your core audience and always will be for a horse racing programme. But you've also got to give people a reason to want to watch a good big horse race like the Tingle Creek today, even if they haven't had a bet. And I stand by that. I think that's a really important thing. It's basically storytelling.
If you look at it, we've got the old beach, and it's good to get off to a flying start, but it's our usual decent build-up. Exactly. Right, off we go, team. It's as we've said there at the top. Yes, we may have lost one or two of the so-called potential stars of the future, but it's still a very, the big weekends just keep coming thick and fast. Only Cheltenham, Betford Chase, Hennessy, and now here. Gina's 30 seconds from entry will, I would think, mostly be about the weather, given that there's still a slight danger that it doesn't get through the whole day. That's how strong the winds are predicted up in the north.
I just thought a couple of shots in your
eye.
Just say it's a Christmas day.
So if we do, you and camera one at 12:20 by the fence.
Tell me about the innovations you've experimented with in the last 3 years or so, and those you're most happy about, the ones that you feel have really worked.
Innovation's a word that gets bandied about in telly, isn't it?
So I thought I'd band it about.
Yeah, but
as everybody else does.
Yeah, no, it is, and I kind of try and bring it down a bit, because it makes it. It's usually simple things, really, isn't it? And I think it's simple things that. But what I think we have done is kind of, with the help of the sports authorities and governing bodies and Jockeys Association, we've sort of thrown the doors open a bit, haven't we? And we've gone into places. The day of the St Leger Stewards inquiry kind of gave it a focus for me, because we had a camera in the stewards' room, so therefore we were able to get the whole Petrocelli of the moments of the trial in there.
That dates you.
Yeah, exactly. And just the way that Andrea had in there was, you know, and the way it was played off, and the way Colin O'Donoghue was so good and almost did look like he'd been legally trained. The reaction in the jockey's room, because we had a camera in there, and then just simply the skills of our presentation team around that, pulling all that together, was probably one of the moments that gave me most pride. Many people have said to me, and I've seen people outside the sport say it, that half an hour was the best bit of racing drama they've seen on television.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you, how much of it have you got after they crossed the line, Carl?
But Nick was always going to be a key ingredient for our team because, you know, with all due respect to Claire, even when she was on board the first year, she was doing 40 days, and the man who was doing 90, near enough, it was Nick. And I'd never worked with Nick, so establishing that relationship with him. And from the very first programme, I remember it was the walk back for the Welsh National, and it was the one where Monbeg Dude had just chinned. Actually, it was T for 3. He just, Monbeg Dude had just chinned T for 3 on, and the way he just captured the essence of all the 2 or 3 stories in 30 seconds. He's a consummate broadcaster, and he's right up there. And I've worked with, in my career, I've worked with some of the finest broadcasters, both presenters and commentators. When you talk about Des Lynam, Steve Ryder, John Inverdale, Sue Barker, Hazel Irvine, Claire.
Yeah.
Some of the, and many others. I don't want to miss anyone out, but it's, and Nick belongs in that class.
He does.
And people underestimate Rishi. Rishi's presented Olympic Games for the BBC and Commonwealth Games, and he's the golf interviewer and does tough jobs. He's a proper rounded broadcaster.
30 seconds to voiceover.
Alrighty, Mick Fitzgerald this morning went for Bristol de May in the Henry VIII and Ebony Express. Anita Carberry, all in, Summersby, her own ride. Paul Keeley likes Sol and Carol's Destrier. Sam Twiston Davis' selection's already run and has been quite comprehensively beaten Flying Angel in the 105 at Aintree, and Tanya likes Deep Trouble to reprise his success of 2 years ago in the handicap hurdle here, and Mountainous, the former Welsh national winner in the 3:35 in the London National. Before I head outside into the studio to have a word with Graham and Mick, belting afternoon in Prospect Mick, Tingle Creek Chase, a race you're very fond of for very good reason.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to steer the Mighty Koto Star around here, and it literally was a case of steering round. He made his usual mistake at the last, but even I couldn't get it wrong.
You don't like seeing this because it doesn't exactly show the horse at his best, but he used to do that regularly, belt the last and get away with it.
Do you know what the great thing is? It didn't say that on the Weatherby's check when it came to the post. And the great thing was, this horse went on to legend.
Yeah, that was the beginning. That was just the start.
That was the beginning, and for me, it's a real privilege to have been associated with the horse, even if it was just for 5 minutes.
5 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
You've had more than 5 minutes of fame, GC. This race has certainly had more than 5. Desert Orchid, Moscow Flyer, Sprinter Sacra. We haven't got a horse of that calibre in today's race, but it's a really fascinating little contest.
Yeah, it is a case of some of the A-listers being absent, Nick, but as you know from your theatrical days,
where this is going.
the understudies can grab the
going.
limelight and keep it, a bit like dodging bullets on this day last year.
And nothing wrong with a couple of C-listers. And talking of that, let's head out onto the track and join Rishi Fasad.
Well, it's windy out here on the course, but first of all,
that's low.
Sorry, that was...
Tanya next, then...
Sorry, Carl.
Does Claire Balding presenting a show of itself attract more viewers?
No, I'm not think that's controversial for me to say, and Claire would support me in saying that. I don't think it does, no. I've worked with Claire since 1997, when she first started, appeared on the BBC. I worked with her on many other sports as well as horse racing, and there's no doubt she's one of the finest sports broadcasters this country's produced. But even she would turn around, if she was sat in this chair, and say, the key about sports broadcasting is not the person who's doing the broadcasting, it's the sport. What Claire gives us is that breadth because she's known outside the racing community. The fact that she's presented the Olympics a number of times, the fact that she presents the Paralympics, the fact that she's presented Commonwealth Games, the fact that she's presented boat races, the experience and the breadth that she's brought from those events qualifies her skills as a horse racing presenter. She's more sort of at home in horse racing than anything because she was bred for it, so literally in that sense. But she brings with her experiences from outside as well. She's one of the best at sort of trying to make the racing broadcast broader and wider appealing because she knows from her work outside of racing that it's frustration, and that's its little thing that we all have to be conscious of all the time. Don't be too in. Don't do too much of this. Don't do too much that's going to exclude. And you know, and that's a really hard tightrope to walk all the time. But we walk it every day, every hour when we're on air. You've got to satisfy the specialist, whilst also encouraging the broader person who's not necessarily know what the rating of cider grugy is versus vibrato valtap, but would be quite interested to hear that the Preston family bought that for the dad as a birthday present, and
Yes.
wow, that horse has gone on to be a champion chaser, and it's the only horse he's ever owned. I think it was his 50th birthday, wasn't it, and they all grouped to buy it. That's a story that you can't tell too often, because that makes you go, oh wow, that's great, isn't it? Imagine if we'd have done that for dad or granddad and stuff. It's that kind of storytelling, isn't it? I mean, I still maintain that his last day was one of my favourite programmes and one of the proudest I've ever worked on, because I think it was, you know, we gave Watson good days racing. Obviously had a special focus and a special meaning that day, and it was a lovely day. The pitches were fantastic, but I think we really got, it was the kind of day I wanted for us to be able to broadcast for the sport, to show sports fans and people, wow, that's a really great sport. Because I think we captured the camaraderie of the jockeys. One of my favourite moments, Richard Johnson won the last race that McCoy rode in. This is the man who'd finished behind him in numerous jockeys championships, and you might think had a bit of resentment for the fella. And when Alice asked him a question on his walk back interview after the race, he broke down and cried. And Alice did as well. And I think actually most of us in the scanner had a little tear at that point. It was actually quite, you know, and then the great counterpoint was John Joe O'Neill came on and sort of said after the ride, he's just given that horse of mine, he'll never ride for me again, and just like broke the tension in a really great humorous way. From the moment of McCoy, then we had the Mullins Day on the first day of Cheltenham, and then Annie Power coming down at the last, you know, and the massive payday for the bookies being saved. We had an extraordinary Grand National, because before it was AP's last national, and Shut the Front Door went off favourite, and 5 hour he looked like he might win. Those of us who'd backed Many Clouds were delighted, but even that turned into that was an up and down story, because he couldn't come back into the winner's enclosure. The horse looked like he might collapse out on the course. That was again that up and down of, you know, storytelling that we had to go through, and I was very proud of our team, Alice Plunkett in particular that day, because she followed it through and she had the knowledge of the horse to know he'd done the same at the Hennessy. She was with them all the way. We were able to tell Oliver Sherwood, the trainer who couldn't see his horse anymore, no, your horse is fine, Alice says so.
Right, yeah,
and he said, if Alice says so, then I'm happy. So that was a great day of storytelling. But in the biggest moment there, it could have been a very negative story, you know. Yeah. Then we had the whole Frankie factor in the flat season, didn't we? The sort of, you know, Frankie coming back. The renaissance of Frankie D was fantastic, you know, and great for us, because I think we'd supported Frankie when he perhaps wasn't being supported, and he's on our team. And he, by the way, is a great broadcaster. He's just got that X factor, hasn't he?
Let me tell you my attitude during my 25 odd years in TV as a producer to viewing figures. It was this: if you're making a programme at 1 in the morning and you're getting millions of viewers or something, then you're doing something very right.
Yes.
If you're producing a programme at 7 on a Friday or a Saturday or something, 7 o'clock at night, and it's being watched by one man and a dog, then maybe you need to think again. Surely, in this day and age, viewing figures are meaningless, because people watch programmes whenever they want.
Yeah, not meaningless, but and I wouldn't go on the defensive about it, but I do think there's a context to viewing figures that is being lost at the minute about generally across the racing media, because you're right, it's a much more complex beast than it's probably ever been in terms of viewing habits, opportunities to view. I mean, me and you both can remember when there were probably only 3 channels to watch, and
Indeed.
the Horse of the Year show on BBC One at 9:25 used to rack up 12 or 13 minute views in the days of David Broom and Harvey Smith. Now, things like that, there's a massive change in television and the way that people consume their television, as you say. There's also a massive change in the way people... Well, television isn't as central to their lives, I don't think, as it was when we were growing up. I think there are more, by definition, you know, more things to do for people. Yeah. And it's simple things like that. We've got to make people want to watch, you know, and that's complex. We're never happy when things are down, but there have been many triumphs for us within that period. I mean, Aintree take great pride in the fact they're on Channel 4. The figures have been, you know, very nearly 9 million every year for the whole 3 years, and that's been the most watched programme on Channel 4 every year. So there's not much wrong there with the event, and I think the way the channel have supported the event, they've given it that what I call the old FA Cup final treatment, haven't they? When the National's been on 4, they really have given it that, you know, programmes around it through the week leading up to it, on the day of it. It's all about the Grand National. So I think the channel has been massively supportive of the sport in that sense. That's its biggest event, and that's actually achieved figures on Channel 4 higher than when it was on the BBC for 2 out of the 3 years. There was a big viewing figure in the last one in 2012.
So is audience share, what do you judge it by in this day and age? Is audience share more
we could
important?
get very complex, but one of the reasons our overall share and average is down is we do longer shows than we used to do as well. Because we believe it's important for the sport, and because it's a sport that is minority A-list sport, as I would call it, that we allow those storytelling moments. So we fight to get extra airtime, but we all know that in real terms action is king. If you come on 5 minutes before the first race and come off 5 minutes after the last, your show will be at its highest. Because when you're doing preview, review, it makes us happy as producers and we're doing whatever, but it's never the highest part, it's never the peak part of any show, is it? You know, we as TV producers can, you know, spend all our time, as I always used to ironically say, filling the bits that the action doesn't fill. And the action is what people switch on for, whatever sport it is. Now, the beauty of horse racing is you have, by comparison with many other sports, a relatively blank canvas, don't you? I.e., we can be on for, even today, we're on for 2.5 hours, and the actual action of the 7 races, even though they're jumps races, will add up to 40 minutes. So we've still got plenty of other time in theory, haven't we, to sort of, you know, tell the stories. So it's a great sport to work on from that front. And as you say, the audience thing is a complex beast, and I do think there's a lot of gross simplification of it at the minute, but in a way, I would say that, wouldn't I, if some of our figures are down.
The Racing Post obviously covers that story a lot.
Yes.
The Guardian, a newspaper shedding readers like crazy, seems obsessed with your viewing figures. Other people seem, to my mind, out of proportion obsessed with your viewing figures. Personally, I don't get it.
No, I hear you, and it is frustrating at times. I won't hide the fact that it's frustrating, because I do, and rightly as you say, you know, we try not to get into spats with the Racing Post because, you know, we need them, they need us, you know.
But I wonder why, I
don't get it. The correlation between the quality of a programme and the amount of people who watch it is a far too simplistic.
But the quality, in my opinion, as it's been well publicised, of Channel 4 racing, in particular the coverage of the racing itself, has never been better. So, begs the question, why aren't people watching in greater numbers?
I think actually our audiences generally have stood up relatively well.
Okay.
I do think that the sport has lots of issues. We all know the sport has issues, but actually they don't really reflect too much on the days that we do, because we do the high end of the sport. We do, even though we do 90 days, that's what, less than a quarter of the number of days racing that there are in this country. So we are on the high end. I will never ever say there's a bad day's racing on Channel 4 because I simply don't believe there is. I think of those 90 days that we do, obviously by definition there's a top 10 in some people's eyes and there's probably a bottom 10. And most people would probably work out which ones fit in both categories, don't they? But if you looked at the bottom 10 that we do, they're all bloody good days racing, you know, and they've got great stories and we go to places that are different, and for them it's a very big day and we need to reflect that. That's one thing I've consistently said is we don't, you know, it's the polish that we can bring on 90 days of the year that counts for the sport, I think, and that's hard to do.
But it's Highland Lodge on his first run for James Moffat. He wins the Beckford Feature Chase. Highland Lodge with beaten Dare to Endeavour and Donatello from Seoul ahead of Vix Canvas and Financial Climate. Further back to Saintar, Union East and Guniella, and those the ones to get round.
Tip your hat to Jimmy Moffat, who bought this horse Highland Lodge at the sales recently for 22,000 and has netted a pot of 78,000, winning the Beecher Chase. First run for Jimmy since leaving Emma Labelle, a horse who looked really promising in his younger days. Highland Lodge wins at 20-1, Dare to Endeavour second, Donatello third, Sol was fourth. Financial Climate ran really well, nearly collided with the elbow and was badly hampered. But well done Henry Brook, well done Jimmy Moffat, a really important strike for the North in one of the North's big races.
No stranger to big shocks at entry. Chief Dan George was it in a big hurdle race?
Hey.
Was it? Sorry, Mick.
What I'm very proud of is that the base level of what we've achieved and brought up the standards on a week in, week out. So that when we go to the one day of the year, we go to Warwick in January, we do a good a job there as when we're at Cheltenham a couple of weeks later, you know, and I think that's really important. So there are issues for the sport. The issues with us are not the ones that rightly are concerned. Field sizes and all these things that go down, and relationship value for punters, owners, how you're going to make them stay in the game when it's becoming more costly. There are lots of racing problems and issues that we like to think we're a part of that media and we cover the stories. I don't think they necessarily equate as to why there are less people watching it on telly. I think that's a more complex issue.
But don't you think racing needs to promote itself as well as you have promoted racing in the big events? Your glossy ads that you've done, which money has been thrown at to promote the National and other big and Cheltenham. Why don't I see TV commercials from the racing authorities promoting the best of racing, saying go racing?
I think I'm not speaking for GBR, but I would think they would say that that's what they're there to do. And like everybody else, if they wish they had more money to spend, and they would have TV commercials for Champions Day has been a good example, hasn't it? Where they have thrown a fair bit of money and resources to try to promote that day. I've always said about horse racing as a sport is, as a village, it's a sort of big village community, isn't it? And a lot of the time, if it spent more time looking outside the village than looking inside the village as to what's not, it would be absolutely a lot better off for it.
Here now is the last fence, Ahmed.
Right, this is unbelievable. Gary Moore has had 8 winners at Sandown in the last...
The line now, 150 yards to go, and none of them have been able to lay a...
Yeah, trouble yesterday, trouble at the previous meeting.
This is his second today.
Who's led all the way and jumped beautifully all the way and wins the Henry VIII Novices Chase in great style. Another for the Moors.
Gary Moore had a treble here yesterday. He had a treble here at the previous fixture, Sunday at the beginning of November, and he's had an 89-1 double today. 8 winners here at Sandown Park. We're only halfway through the day, and he's still got Stable Star Cider Cruising to come. He will never want to leave this place. And a man who, as recently as 3 weeks ago, was in a hospital bed in intensive care.